All right, welcome to ZZ Feet. ZZ Feet is a standalone segment in which either myself, my co-host, or both of us speak to someone or invite someone to our podcast to talk about something that they're well-versed in or an expert in. This is the very first time that it's not Zino by himself doing one, so this is history in the making. We're actually both here. Zino, say hi to the people.
Hey, people.
All right, so today we have Shyla Saltzman, aka the Saltz Professor. She has a PhD in English literature from Cornell University. She studies gender, race, and pop culture. She has published pieces on TV shows like Buffy and One Day at a Time. And one of the big reasons why I invited her on the show is because she has a podcast called The Dome Ship, which is a recap podcast on the greatest YA series of all time, Animorphs. Shyla, how are you?
I am very good and very flattered and excited that I get to do my first ever interview as a podcaster with you guys.
Well, we're flattered that you picked us for your first interview. I know Zeus has been really hype on this one because I think he always finds two things to talk about whenever we do our podcast. It's either the show Titus, which he doesn't believe should have been canceled, or it's Animorphs, which he has behind him on his bookshelf.
And
nice.
And it's not on this bookshelf. I actually was thinking about editing my entire room just to put those books down there up here just so they can be on the background, but I got lazy, so I didn't get to do that.
I understand.
So Shyla, thank you again. Or I'm sorry, you want to go by the Salty Professor, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, real quickly, one of the big things that I noticed in the episodes in which your podcast episodes is you do introduce yourself as a Black queer feminist. So first, we just wanted to ask you, just explain to us who you are, right? What we need to know about you, and then also, what does Black queer feminism mean to you?
All right. So I am primarily a teacher. I've been a professor at the college level for a number of years. And by queer, I mean specifically I'm a lesbian. And so, I always bring that lens of understanding different ways of being not the norm in terms of being Black, in terms of being queer, in terms of, in some cases, being a woman. And so as a teacher, which I think is a form of activism or can be, I'm always trying to help my students, or in this case now my listeners, get a glimpse of, different perspectives and, understanding, a lot of things that we can overlook if we can't relate when it comes to like privileges and things like that, because I really want people to be more empathic towards each other. And so that's really my main goal when I, get in front of people to talk about different experiences.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the big things that Zino and I, when we launched our podcast, was about the difference of representation, which will be touched because, as stated, you do teach courses in gender, race, and pop culture, right? And honestly, that's Zino can attest. That's pretty much the gist of ZZ Talk, because that's one of the big things that we do talk about. Zino, real quickly, do you have any follow-up questions?
I do have a follow-up question. So thank you for the intro. I wanted to touch more specifically on the three words you used to describe yourself, or that we mentioned that you used, which is the Black queer feminist thing. The feminist part of it, right? I think a lot of people, a lot of men specifically, seem to think that you can't be a feminist unless you're a woman, or one way or another. So could you help explain to us what it means to be a feminist and who can be a feminist, and so on and so forth?
Okay, good. Because this is something that it actually becomes like a hot button thing with students, even the women too. There's a lot of misconceptions about feminism. a lot of bad mouthing and, you know, a lot of just kind of misinformation. And so, you know, people think that feminism is exclusively for women, or they think that, you know, being a feminist means that you hate men. You know, that's, you know, it's kind of seen as sort of villainous in some way. And really, it can pertain to anybody. It should pertain to everybody. And it means that you believe that people should be given the same respect and compassion and opportunity regardless of what their gender is. So for me, it's a very all-inclusive concept. It's not even just about women. It's also a way to champion men as well, which is something that really blows kids' minds because, you know, sexism has a negative effect on everybody. You know, there are a lot of toxic expectations from men that can end up being really abusive, you know, like men being less likely to seek therapy, having, you know, a limited ability to connect with their friends because there's so many taboos about men expressing closeness. They're, you know, just the way there are some types of careers or interests or skills that are seen as, you know, women are excluded from, you know, there are things that isn't proper for women to want to do or be. That's those similar expectations are put on men as well. And so one of the things that I always try to do with my students is to show them that everyone has something to gain from this inclusive view of feminism.
Do you see a because you mentioning the being a negative towards men as well? Do you also see, is there a correlation to the negative view that a lot of people might have towards feminism and racism? Because it also seems like within the minority communities, feminism is, you know, automatically of a minority man as being a feminist, right? Or being I guess inclusive towards, you know, they're all of a sudden they're an F word, you know, of course, you know, you know what I mean?
I see.
Word, but, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, stop being this, stop being that. Do you see a correlation between racism and the negative connotation that feminism is getting in some of our communities?
Okay, so I might have something like an answer, but maybe then you can help me understand if I'm not getting the question right. It seems like what you're pointing out is kind of two things, like homophobia in communities of people of color, and also the association of, like, you know, softness or rejecting, like, male kind of stoic toxic gender norms as like a sign that they're less of a man, that they are.
You got the question right.
Okay. And so I'm gonna say that's not specific to communities of color, although I think that often when in the mainstream, when we talk about feminism, when we talk about you know, other types of bias like transphobia, homophobia, it's often focused on white people, I think. And that this is something that has, you know, brought up some critiques of like feminism and like, should we change, you know, do we need a different term? There are lots of kind of competing philosophies about how to move forward, because often with talk about gender, talk about feminism, it is very focused. It's very focused on white people, and there's like a erasure of the experiences of people of color, which is particularly damaging because, you know, when it comes to being transgender, for example, people of color are far more likely to lose their lives. And but I do, it's hard because on the one hand, yes, especially in you know, I've witnessed myself in Black and brown communities, and I've read things and watched things about homophobia in those communities, and but I don't want to overly cast like any specific group as being like particularly hateful, because it's kind of coming from everywhere. It is true though that in some cases there seems to be this sort of competing pressures when it comes to men of color who are like, you know, I don't want to be doubly
Stigmatized.
like, yes, by, you know, I'm already, you know, facing this disadvantage for not being white. I'm seen as threatful. That's not a word. I'm seen as threatening. I'm, you know, my body is sort of automatically criminalized or deemed, you know, less intelligent. But then on top of that, even my own people could possibly look down on me if I'm trying to, you know, like, confront them for saying like problematic things. So let me at least keep, you know, my tribe intact, and, you know, eat every man for himself sort of idea. And that's really too bad.
Yeah, and that's the biggest concern that I was inquiring about, was just how the fact is, as people of color, we have to face being alive as an issue, right? And then it's just now all of a sudden says so that perfect answer to the question. Zino?
Yeah. So and both of you just touched on it as far as I guess battling homophobia in communities of color. And I know you didn't want to generalize. I'm from Nigeria, so I'm African. I have no problem generalizing to say that Africa in general, but not so much. I mean, definitely Nigeria, but I think they said Uganda specifically is very homophobic, right? And not to even mention transphobic as well. So I had a follow-up question with regards to coming from, you know, the Black community, and whether, you know, growing up in that community, how did it affect your willingness to identify as you do now? Because obviously we're all adults now, and we're able to see ourselves in a clearer light than we might have when we were younger. So how did it affect your willingness to identify yourself as such? Was it a late bloomer sort of situation, or did you always feel comfortable? I don't know if comfortable is the word, but, you know, feel okay with saying, yeah, that I am who I am.
Yeah, I get it. I was definitely late to the party. And my own family, it's interesting because, you know, there's often an assumption that I run into in the Black community that, you know, Black people are automatically extremely Christian. It's funny because my family wasn't particularly religious, but there was still a kind of underlying understanding that, you know, that being gay wouldn't be okay. It's something that, you know, I don't remember having a particular talk about. I just sort of somehow absorbed that message, you know, from the larger world and from home. And so what happened is I never really allowed myself to consider that I might be gay. I knew that I wouldn't have used the word straight, but I knew that I wasn't interested in men, but I felt like at the time I was also dealing with like growing up a lot of bullying and stuff. I was just like, you know, I'm weird, I'm gonna be alone, and that's cool. Like I'm used to that, and like it's fine. And it just never, I just like totally shut the door and just didn't even consider. I was just aromantic, and that was that until college. And suddenly people around me started to explore their identities, and it made me feel like, you know, perhaps I can entertain the idea that, you know, there might be something that, you know, that something might be not what I expected. And I felt more secure at that point too, because I was more independent. So I don't wish I had come out any earlier. I feel like that would have been very traumatic. So I am, it's, you know, not everyone has the luxury of being aware, self-aware and accepted at a young age. So
Right. So the catalyst was seeing, I guess, yourself represented in others around you and realizing that it's not so bad. So follow up to that is, so once you got that realization of who you are, is that a conversation that you've had with your family since? Is it a conversation you felt the need to have with your family, or how'd that
I
go?
felt the need to, I knew that I have two sisters. I knew that they would be fine. I think I just like, I don't even know, maybe it was a text. It like wasn't a big deal at all. But I felt the need to talk to my mother, and that's like who I was the most afraid to tell, because I wanted her support the most, you know, and she did her best. She was she, you know, her first reaction was like, well, it's not like you're telling me you're a murderer. And it seemed like she was really trying to like reinforce that for herself, like it could be worse, you know. And, but I got that. I wasn't. I laughed at it, but I appreciated that she was trying really hard, and it definitely it took her a moment to be comfortable, but she's totally fine now. She knows my wife. They get along great. But at the time, you know, she told me not to tell any other family members, you know, it should just be between us. And that was a little disappointing. Eventually, one of my aunts found out, and she told me, I heard about your situation. And I just want you to know that you know, I still love you. And it was kind of like a, that was a moment where again I'm like, you're trying, it's fine, this is the best you've got, it's fine. But eventually, you know, I've even brought my wife to California, where I'm from, to see my family for Christmas. And so I'm very lucky in the fact that there was definitely some weirdness, but they clearly they worked to get over that for me. So it's
good.
Yeah.
Which part of California?
Southern California, kind of like
Because I'm not going to lie, you saying all this, I'm thinking Alabama. I'm thinking further down south. I'm not thinking liberal California. Like to be real, I'm over here thinking, I'm like, and then it just kind of makes you realize it's like, no, it doesn't matter where you are.
This is a common misconception that I faced when I went to college on the East Coast. And I remember like Prop 8 was happening.
Yeah.
And everyone was convinced like California, they're thinking like California is all San Francisco, I guess. And like, they're just so blue and everything's gonna be fine. And I'm like, listen, like, that is not what California as a whole is. There's large pockets of Southern California in particular that are very conservative.
Zino and I have actually discussed this where you remember, Zino, when we talked about progressiveness and liberalism, and I was like, just because California is liberal doesn't mean it's progressive. So I get what you're saying, but even then, even though I know that, right, I'm over here thinking you're saying all this, I'm like, oh, it's probably somewhere else, you know. But
so Prof, I do have a point of clarification for our audience, if you could. What is Prop 8?
Prop 8 was a bill that was meant to block gay marriage, right? Yes. Sorry, I couldn't remember for a second which way it went, but the point is, you know, vote yes on Prop 8 if you do not want to allow same-sex marriage to happen in California. And the whole country was kind of looking to California as like setting a precedent, like what are you going to do? And there was a lot of suspense, you know, a lot of people who were like trying to hold out hope because California always votes blue, that it's going to be fine. And I was trying to tell my friends, like, it's not going to be fine. You know, even my mom voted yes on Prop 8 at the time. I wasn't out to her, and she I was like, what, why? Like, it doesn't have any, there's nothing at stake for you. Like,
Yeah.
what is the problem? And she said, what was it? She said something like, she believed that kind of like gay relationships are sort of juvenile. Like, it's something that it's like a phase you have when you're young, and then you need to like grow up and like get real, and that's what, you know. And I was just like internally crushed, but just like, oh, okay, like whatever.
I have actually heard someone said that they told their parents like 20 years after they've been married to their same partner. I was like,
Wow.
well, I'm still in the phase. I'm still in this phase.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay.
Well, I was just gonna ask, do you think there's any more questions in this subject, or you want to move over to the?
No, I think we pretty well nailed it.
Sure.
Any other thing to add on your identity, or would you like to go on to your exploits in teaching?
Oh, that's all right. Let's move on.
All right.